Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive with us. Before we get started, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any of our future episodes. All right, so let's jump right in. Today, we're going deep on a topic that's got everyone talking: the future contract of San Francisco 49ers quarterback Brock Purdy.
Buckle up. It's going to be a fascinating ride.
You know him, right? Mr. Irrelevant, the last pick of the 2022 draft. No one, and I mean no one, expected much from this guy.
And boy, did he prove everyone wrong.
To say the least.
Yeah.
He completely took the NFL by storm, led the 49ers all the way to the Super Bowl in his rookie season. It's the kind of story you just can't make up.
A true Cinderella story.
Yeah.
So the big question now is, what's his next contract going to look like?
Exactly. The guy's a proven winner, and the 49ers are clearly all in on him as their franchise quarterback.
Yeah.
But how does that translate into dollars and cents? Well, to understand the money, you got to understand the performance.
Absolutely. And let's be real. Purdy's rookie year, off the charts. 4,280 passing yards, 31 touchdowns, only 11 interceptions.
And just to put a cherry on top, he shattered the 49ers single-season passing record.
That's not just good, that's historic, especially when you consider he was Mr. Irrelevant, the last pick in the entire draft.
Talk about exceeding expectations. But let's be honest, the 2024 season was a bit of a reality check for the team, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, for sure. The team's record dipped to 6-11, a far cry from that Super Bowl run. But Purdy individually, still pretty solid.
He really did hold his own.
3,864 passing yards, 25 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions in 15 games. So, the talent, it's undeniably there. The big question is, can he lift the team back to that championship level?
That's the multi-million-dollar question. Speaking of millions, sports journalist Diana Russini predicts Purdy's next contract is going to land somewhere between $55 and $60 million per year.
Wow, that puts him right up there with the elite quarterbacks, even if the team's success hasn't quite caught up yet.
It's a fascinating prediction, right?
Yeah.
Because it speaks volumes about the value NFL teams place on potential.
Absolutely. And Purdy has got it all. Talent, leadership, and that winning pedigree from his rookie year. Teams are willing to bet big on that kind of upside, even with a few question marks.
And it's not just about the money for Purdy, at least that's what it seems like. Russini said he's not fixated on being the highest paid quarterback. She even quoted him saying he'd be happy making just a bit more than what he's currently making.
As long as he can keep driving his Toyota, right?
Exactly. That's the quote. You don't see that attitude in professional sports very often.
It really is refreshing. He seems genuinely motivated by the love of the game, by chasing those championships, and honestly, that could work in the 49ers' favor when it comes to negotiations.
If he's not out there trying to break the bank, that gives him more flexibility to build a stronger team around him.
Exactly. That's smart team management.
And speaking of the 49ers, both general manager John Lynch and head coach Kyle Shanahan have been very vocal. They see Purdy as their long-term franchise quarterback. Shanahan even went as far as to say he's sticking with Purdy as long as he's with the team and that they can win a Super Bowl together.
Those are some powerful statements, and they carry a lot of weight when it comes to contract negotiations. It's a very public show of faith in Purdy. It significantly strengthens his position.
No doubt. Having that kind of backing from the front office gives Purdy some serious leverage at the negotiating table.
It's like having a royal flush in poker.
But what happens if, and this is a big if, they can't reach an agreement before the 2026 season? We've got to talk about the elephant in the room, the franchise tag. It's always lurking in the background, isn't it?
The franchise tag. The nuclear option in contract negotiations. It always adds another layer of complexity.
Can you break it down for our listeners who might not be familiar with how it works and what it could mean for Purdy and the 49ers?
You got it. So in a nutshell, the franchise tag is a one-year contract that teams can use to keep a player from becoming a free agent. The salary for that year is predetermined based on the average of the top 5 salaries at the player's position.
So for Purdy, it would essentially guarantee him a top-tier quarterback salary, but only for a single season. It's a short-term solution, right?
Exactly. It buys the 49ers some time to hammer out a long-term deal, but it comes with some inherent risks. First off, it's expensive. You're paying top dollar for just 1 year, and that can put a strain on the team's salary cap.
And I can imagine it might create some tension between the player and the team. It's almost like saying, hey, we value you, but not enough to commit long-term just yet.
You hit the nail on the head. It can lead to hard feelings, especially if the player feels like they've earned a long-term commitment.
So it's a powerful tool, but one that teams use very, very carefully.
Absolutely. There's a lot to consider. It's a high-stakes game for sure. Now let's unpack some of those factors that are at play here because it's a pretty fascinating mix. On the one hand, you have Purdy's on-field performance, his rookie year. Phenomenal, no doubt about it. But the big question is, can he consistently perform at that level? The 2024 season did show some regression, so that's something the 49ers will be taking into consideration.
Absolutely. You can't just ignore the team's overall performance either. They went from Super Bowl contenders to completely missing the playoffs.
Yeah.
How much responsibility for that falls on Purdy's shoulders? It's a tough question to answer, but it's definitely part of the equation.
For sure. And here's where things get really interesting. The 49ers have said publicly they believe in Purdy, but as they say, actions speak louder than words. How much are they willing to put their money where their mouth is, considering those struggles? That's going to be the real test of their commitment.
It all comes down to risk. A massive contract for Purdy could mean they can't sign or keep other important players. It's a balancing act between rewarding his potential and keeping a competitive roster overall.
And we can't forget about the other quarterbacks in the league. It's a constantly evolving market, and big money deals are becoming the norm. Purdy's contract is going to be compared to other quarterbacks who recently signed big contracts, and that could drive up the price. Guys like Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert, they signed those massive extensions, and those deals are going to be benchmarks in these negotiations.
It's almost like a high-stakes poker game, isn't it?
You got it. Each side trying to figure out what the other side has, trying to figure out their limits, and trying to get the best deal they can.
And the stakes couldn't be higher for both sides. Purdy wants to get paid what he deserves, and the 49ers want to lock in their future quarterback, but also make sure they can still build a championship team.
It's a delicate dance, and how this plays out could have a huge impact on the franchise going forward.
Now, you mentioned earlier that Purdy's mindset might be an advantage for the 49ers. He doesn't seem too concerned with being the highest paid player. That could give him a little leverage in negotiations. But how much leverage are we really talking here? Is it realistic to think he'll take a major discount just because he's humble?
That's the million-dollar question. Purdy might not be all about the money, but at the end of the day, he still has a value. His agent is going to push for a deal that makes sense, one that reflects his talent and his potential.
So it's more about finding a compromise, right? Maybe he's willing to be a little below the top, but not way below.
Exactly. It's all about finding that sweet spot where both sides are happy. The 49ers want to get him at a price that works, and Purdy wants to be compensated fairly for what he brings to the table. Don't forget, it's a negotiation. Both sides are going to have to give a little.
And let's not leave out the fans. The 49ers, faithful, they're passionate, and they want to see their team win. They know this contract's going to impact the rest of the roster, so they'll be watching these negotiations like hawks.
You're telling me. The fans are a huge factor in this whole thing. They're invested, they want to see their team succeed, and they want to see their stars get paid.
But they also get that the team has to be smart with money and build a team that's actually good.
It's a tough situation, lots of moving parts. The 49ers need to be careful here if they want to make everyone happy.
So let's recap. We've got Purdy's performance, we've got what the team wants to do overall, we've got the whole quarterback market, that franchise tag possibility, and we've even got Purdy's personality as factors.
Yeah.
It's a lot to consider, and it's anyone's guess how it will all shake out. One thing's for sure, though, it's going to be a crazy ride.
Absolutely. This is going to be the talk of the offseason for sure, and we'll be breaking it all down every step of the way.
For our listeners, we're trying to give you a glimpse into just how complicated this really is. It's easy to say, just pay the man.
But there's way more to it than that.
That's where the fun is. Digging into the details, looking at it from all angles, and seeing how it all unfolds. Now, as we head into the last part of this deep dive, I want to zoom out a bit and look at the bigger picture. We've talked about the impact on the 49ers roster, but what about the NFL in general?
Great question. Purdy's situation could actually change the way teams think about contracts for young quarterbacks who exceed expectations early on in their careers.
It's pretty wild to think about. This guy who no one thought would amount to much in the NFL could end up changing how teams approach these contracts.
It really shows you how much the NFL is changing, right? You see these young quarterbacks come in, make a name for themselves right away, and teams are having to make tough decisions a lot earlier than they used to.
And it goes beyond just the dollar amount. It's about how these contracts affect the whole team. If you're spending a huge chunk of your budget on one player, that limits what you can do with the rest of the team. So how do you balance paying your quarterback what he's worth and building a team that can actually compete? That's the puzzle every general manager has to figure out.
It's a constant balancing act for sure. They have to weigh the benefits you see right away against what it'll mean down the road. And with the salary cap always hanging over their heads, every decision becomes even more important.
You've seen it before, right? Teams go all in on one quarterback and then they're stuck. They don't have the money to sign other players they need. It can really mess things up for a team.
Yeah, for sure. It's a delicate balance. Purdy's situation is a great example of all the things that go into these negotiations. It's not just about how well he plays, it's about the market, the team, even his personality plays a role.
Before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to the franchise tag. If the 49ers decide to use it, what does that say to Purdy? What does it say to the fans?
It would be a pretty big statement. It would mean the 49ers are keeping him around for at least another year. But it could also cause some problems. It might look like they don't fully trust him or aren't ready to commit.
And let's be real, the franchise tag doesn't usually lead to a happy ending. It feels like a Band-Aid solution, buying some time without really fixing the problem.
Yeah, it doesn't exactly scream trust and good faith. It can leave both sides feeling unsure and even resentful. So if the 49ers use it, they better be ready for what might happen.
All right, so let's take a look back at what we talked about. We talked about Purdy's journey, what's going to affect his next contract, and what this means for the whole NFL. It's a complex story, and it's still going. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, I think the big thing to remember is how complex all of this is. It's easy to just look at the headlines and the money, but there's so much more going on behind the scenes.
It's about understanding how the business of football works, how talent and money have to work together, and how people's decisions affect everything.
And as we've seen with Brock Purdy, you never know who's going to shake things up and make everyone rethink how the game is played. He's proof that in the NFL, anything can happen.
Well said. As we finish up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one last thought. How is this contract going to affect the 49ers' chances of winning a Super Bowl? That's the question everyone will be asking all offseason, and only time will tell. Thanks for joining us for another deep dive. We hope you enjoyed it, and be sure to tune in next time for another fascinating topic from the world of sports.